This is episode 5 of Entrepreneurs for a Change. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to our mailing list at entrepreneursforachange.com. Are you ready to be the change? If so, you've come to the right place. You're about to join a movement of entrepreneurs who are empowering people, saving the planet, and turning their passion into profits while creating the lifestyle of their dreams. If you don't believe us, check out our website at entrepreneursforachange.com. A place where you can be inspired, mentored, and supported by a tribe of change-making entrepreneurs just like you. Hello, changemakers. This is Lorna Lee, your host of Entrepreneurs for a Change. Today, I'll be speaking with a social entrepreneur from the nonprofit side of the fence. Her name is Pamela Hawley, and she's the founder and CEO of Universal Giving, the only nonprofit marketplace that allows you to give 100% of your donation directly to the cause. It's the best way to give freely, where all your money goes directly to the top nonprofit leaders who need it the most in the most remote parts of the world. And the great thing about donating through Universal Giving is the trust you can have that your money will be well spent. That's because they vet every nonprofit through their stringent, proprietary quality model to weed out organizations that are ineffective or even fraudulent and identify the charities that make the biggest positive impact in the communities they serve. Through Universal Giving, you can give gifts of books, backpacks, and computers. You can help rescue Nepalese girls from captivity or provide computer literacy training to a girl in rural Ghana and more. Or you can help fund an entire project like emergency relief for victims of the Typhoon Haiyan disaster in the Philippines. Check out their list of causes at www.universalgiving.org. In this insightful interview, Pamela will share seasoned advice from the social enterprise trenches on the number one key action you need to take to make the transition from startup idea to launch, the pieces of the funding puzzle you'll need to have in place to attract startup capital, what qualities you and your organization will need to have in order to boost trust and confidence with potential funders, Universal Giving's innovative income strategy that enables them to pass through 100% of donations directly to the cause, the step-by-step process they use to attract the best volunteers and interns, and much, much more. What I love about this interview is Pamela's emphasis on the importance of building a great team. I can't stress this enough, folks, especially if you're a solopreneur and have gotten really used to wearing multiple hats and doing everything yourself. But you gotta do it because you, as the founder, need to be focused on high-level strategy and the big vision, not be bogged down by administrative tasks. Doing everything yourself is simply not scalable. Face it, sometimes life can get in the way. We're human. We can get sick or, God forbid, have an accident. Family emergencies can arise that take over our time, energy, and focus. And if your business comes to a grinding halt, the loss of momentum can be even harder to recuperate. So, entrepreneurs, the sooner you can take yourself out of your business, the faster your business can grow. Now, if you are a small business or an early-stage entrepreneur who doesn't have hundreds of thousands of startup capital to dip into, then hiring a team can seem cost-prohibitive. But I have a solution for you. If you stick around for the end of the episode, I'll share with you some mindset hacks that will help you attract the best employees for your business at a fraction of the cost. Plus a handy platform with a built-in tool you can use to find great talent, manage your team, track hours, and perform automatic billing. Now on to the interview. So hey Pamela, I remember when we first met years ago when I was at the social venture incubator Social Fusion, which spun off from the Women's Technology Cluster in San Francisco. So I'm so thrilled to finally reconnect with you and to see how you've grown Universal Giving since then. I would love for you to update me on the latest and greatest projects that you are working on right now.
Sure, Lorna, it's such a pleasure to meet with you. You're such an innovator, and it's wonderful to see all the work you're doing and getting these great ideas out there. Universal Giving has been around for 10 years, and it's been very, very exciting what we've been doing and really making a strategic difference in giving and volunteering all across the world. I think what's most exciting is that we've really canvassed more than 125 countries. So when I first started with you, we didn't have any countries when we first knew each other. And so we've gotten to 125, and our goal next is to get to 200 countries and really get into some of the toughest areas that we possibly can. I think, one of the challenges is getting into places that are crisis-oriented places, like a Somalia, like in Ethiopia. How do we get in there and be effective in our giving and having our donors and our volunteers give of themselves, of their time and their money? But also, at the same time, is really getting it to places which aren't always considered a crisis, Lorna. There are places across the world that are not just as well known as places in certain countries in Africa that really do need to be more highlighted, and people just don't know that there's challenges there.
So what are some of the top crisis areas that you feel really need help, or you feel drawn to, or you'd like to have Universal Giving be able to, provide more resources or volunteers to?
It's a good question. I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. Number one is I think that there are places that seem very beautiful, and they are, but they're very challenged. So, for example, if you look at Peru, you'll see one of the excerpts on my blog on Peru when I was there volunteering. And it's a very, very challenged area. It is, you go 1 hour outside of Lima, Lorna, and you have women out there who have an average of 6 children. There are rarely any job training sources. There are not really shelters at all for someone to escape to or go to, and there certainly aren't food programs or soup kitchens available. So what happens is that for many women who are abused, they must stay in those home situations. And to me, Lorna, you have women who are being abused, who have 6 children, who cannot get out of there, do not have that opportunity. But we don't really think about that with Peru. We think about Machu Picchu. We think about different cultural associations with it, rather than the fact that there are people who are really hurting there, very similar to other parts across the world. I think the other area that I think doesn't get as much due attention are certain parts of Central Asia. A lot of these countries that spun off from the former Soviet Union, we don't hear as much about them. And places like Kazakhstan are much healthier, but some of the other ones are really struggling. And I think that they need more attention.
So can you help me understand, what exactly does Universal Giving do? How do you provide assistance to these areas?
Well, what we do at Universal Giving is we go in and we determine who are the top projects all across the world. So we are not, Lorna, about being a clearinghouse for all the nonprofits across the world. The way it works, for example, is a donor comes to our site and says, okay, I want to give to Peru, and I want to be able to help one of these women. And we have actually vetted projects that say, here is a woman that you can help in Peru and help for $50, a month. Help her get on her feet. So it's really what we've done is we've gone in and provided really practical ways that people can take action that way. Or they can go in and search for a volunteer opportunity in working to help clean up a river in Brazil. Or they can go and volunteer to help build a school in Zambia. So it's really practical, hands-on. But I think what really differentiates us is this sense of quality and trust. That's why we don't have all the nonprofits on our site. From a lot of my volunteer travels and a lot of my development work, I saw phenomenal organizations doing incredible work with amazing on-the-ground leaders. And at the same time, I saw a lot of organizations that were fraudulent or not effective or really shouldn't have been in existence. And so what we do is we set up a model that's a 15-stage quality model. We have an NGO services team, and we make sure that all those nonprofits are vetted.
So how do you find them, or do they find you?
It's both. It really is both. We strategically look at how many organizations do we have on our site, in which countries they're in, according to which issues areas, and then we look and say, well, where do we need to build out? Where can we be of most use to the world? And where do we need to build out according to areas of interest, both to what we believe is right, as well as to what our clients are telling us. At the same time, it's also organizations coming to us. They find out a lot about us as well.
So I see that prior to Universal Giving, you were also a co-founder of Volunteer Match. So can you help us understand what the difference is between Universal Giving and Volunteer Match?
Yes. Volunteer Match is primarily domestic and it's volunteer opportunities. So they do that and they don't vet the organizations. We are giving and volunteering, and we're mostly international.
I'm always really fascinated by what it takes to launch effective organization, a social change organization, be it nonprofit or for-profit, that has expansive reach. And I'm really fascinated by what it took for you to launch an organization like Volunteer Match or Universal Giving. I mean, it seems like a tremendous endeavor. I'm sure a lot of our readers would love to understand what that process is so that they can go and replicate or do a similar thing, for their mission and their organizations.
Well, I think the first thing you have to look at is you have to look at what your unique passion is and what you are able to really deliver to the community. And that is, first of all, what you have to start off before you think about scaling or anything like that. And so that's number one, is really, what are you really designed to do on this life, this earth here? And I feel very fortunate because I had an experience when I was 12 years old in Mexico with my family, where I was at a marketplace where buying traditional things that you do as a tourist. But my dad and I wandered off and we saw in this cul-de-sac all of these begging, starving, unwashed, dirty children. And it literally changed my life. I just remember seeing the word unacceptable flow across my mind, and it started me and launched me on a life of service. I think what is really key is you have to find that passion. Number two, you have to figure out, do you really want to scale, Lorna? That's something that's bred for a certain type of person. There are other people who really want to stay local, and there's such value to staying local because it's strong community roots, strong community connections, and a real personal connection, and really getting to know that well. And that's not easy to do. In fact, for us as we scale, that's one of the things that we mandate. We need to have those strong local connections. And then I think the really key thing you have to look at, which is a much larger discussion, is what is it that you can do, that you can keep the same, that you can really scale, and what do you need to customize? Because obviously if you customize everything for every country, every community, you'll never get off the ground. So that takes some astute business thinking to think about what is it that I can just scale across the world, and what is it that needs to be customized.
So let's say a person has identified what their unique passion is and what they were meant to do on this earth, and then they've come up with a concept of a valuable service or product that they could offer. What would you recommend that they do? Like, business plan, shop around for, social enterprise, scholarship funds, or, like business plan competitions? Because I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is to get from concept stage to, the first level of organizational capacity. And then from there get to the mezzanine level where they're actually like on the ground and offering valuable services and helping people, and they've got a track record of implementation and getting results. So can you help us demystify that process? What was it like for you?
I would definitely say I went with full-blown business plans, Lorna, and I think it was a very helpful exercise. It was really tough to do, very tough to do, because it was a lot of focused, kind of alone writing of really setting that down. I think in this day and age, you would be very well prepared if you could put together a one-page executive summary. It would force you to think concisely about what your vision is, about what your execution is, and what it's going to take to actually launch this. The biggest danger I see is people who say, oh, I've got this great idea, but then they never take it through to fruition. And that's not bad, because maybe they're not the right person to take it through to fruition. But if you do care about it, then I think that's the key thing, is that you're really being able to put it down on paper and at least get that down, and then start the conversations. You really want to start the conversations, even start to think about building a board of advisors, because that certainly helps. If you're going to go get funding, you want to be able to get some other key people involved and say, look, this is the board behind who I'm doing, or at least start to get some kind of initial funders. But I'd say that one-page summary is something that's really key, because it starts to set it in motion. The other thing I would always start to do is start to think early about your team. Team is so important. Your team is what is going to bring the joy and bring your idea alive in what you do every day. And I can't emphasize that enough. People focus all the time on the idea. That's very important. But teams can innovate, they can create, they can support each other, or they can be the biggest drag on your time. And you got to be very, very careful when you're building that team.
Okay, so you come up with your executive summary and or a business plan, and you shop that document around to potential board members, and then once you get a board assembled, then is that kind of like the green light to go and secure funding?
I would even say you could do that, or you could go and even start to get some of the funders first. Getting the funders, if you could go, for example, and get your one-page executive summary and try and get 3 funders involved, that would be great. Now, I will say that many of the funders will require a full business plan. Some require a PowerPoint deck, and some require budgets. And I actually had a budget and a contingency budget to show if I couldn't fundraise the funds, what could I do on lesser money? So that allowed me to be very prepared. However, that's not true with all funders. Some will fund you right off the bat. So I'd hate to see people do a lot of work if you actually can get it done with a one-page executive summary.
I love that tip there, a budget and then a contingency budget. That is great. That's awesome. Curious to know how often your business plan changed.
Oh, gosh. Well, you always look about what number of countries you think you'll get into. The quality model, oh my goodness, Lorna, when I started off it was 6 stages. Now we have 15 and it expands all the time. And why that happened, it's because you're listening to your customers, you're listening to corporate clients, you're staying in touch with the trends and innovations in the marketplace. And so, it's really important that you stay in touch and realize that sometimes people say, oh, your business idea is totally different than what it started off as. Mine's actually pretty much the same. However, there are innovations that come on top of the innovative original idea. And as far as our revenue model, we're still continuing to work on that as well. So there are certain things that change and certain things don't. But I would definitely say the quality model was one of the key things that changed because we were listening and being innovators.
So you mentioned that there were certain organizations that would fund you off the bat. I would love to know what kinds of early stage funders, like foundations that would fund early stage, nonprofit startups, or, what capacity building organizations or partners you would point people to who are just at the cusp of launching their nonprofit.
Well, that's a good question, Lorna. I don't know a lot of foundations that will do that. I will say that there are definitely individuals who will do it. They'll be inspired by you. And if you're looking for a simpler type of donation, such as $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, they can fund it off the bat, and they can do it over a conversation. When you get to 6 figures, I haven't seen that, but again, that's only my experience. Although I have had funders give me 6 figures without seeing the full business plan. I have seen that. But that was the later stage in our organization, Lorna, so it wasn't from the startup mode without having any idea or any proof of concept. If you really want to go get a lot of support early on and to get that kind of quick check writing, it really is from individual funders, and it's most likely from people that you know, family and friends.
I see. Okay, great. That's good to know. It's always kind of, a curious thing where, is there a place where all these people live and hang out? These angels that will just fund these organizations, write you a check at the end of lunch. But it does seem that, it's pretty much friends and family the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. And even yourself, right? I mean, because for me, I worked out of my home for the first 2 years. I didn't pay myself a salary. I worked off my savings. I have to say that's one of the best ways to fundraise. And I don't mean that you shouldn't get compensated, but my point is that when you do that and when you show your commitment, you will get stronger funding and support because your investors see that you're also committed.
How long did you do that for?
2 years.
Wow, that is brave. That is brilliant. I recently went to a talk with the founder of Somasource, and she had mentioned that, she basically was living off her ex-boyfriend's couch after they had broken up for 4 months. So that was some dedication to really starting her organization.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing. If you can show that you are really being resourceful and you are actually basically fundraising, and if you are actually doing it in different ways. For example, we got pro bono attorneys. We got discounted office space. We showed that people were at reduced salaries. We have a very strong internship and volunteer workforce. If you show that, then that demonstrates to them that you are very committed not only to being in this for the long term, not only to thinking resourcefully, which is a quality that entrepreneurs must not only start with but maintain, because you've got to maintain that respect and that ethics throughout your tenure as an entrepreneur. But it also says, okay, you're committed to this, I'll be more committed to you as well.
So I noticed that on your website you mentioned that Universal Giving doesn't take a cut from any online donations that pass through your platform. How do you guys sustain yourself? Is it just like constant fundraising that you all do?
Well, part of it is our funders believe that this model should exist. Our tagline is give your 100%, and we want people to feel like they're giving 100% of their heart, 100% of their giving. We are not going to penalize that way. And so, first of all, just even our funders believe in that. And I think it's a very pure model. We're nonprofit. We're not here to make money. 100% pass through. We vet all the organizations. But I think part of our biggest value is our qualities and our commitment to quality, our commitment to excellence, and our commitment to trust, so that we have that long-term track record and service in working with our communities. At the same time, it's very important to me as a social entrepreneur, very important, that we basically are able to go in and show that we can fundraise money as well, that we can get it through revenue generation. So, for example, we have a second service called Universal Giving Corporate. And what that is, we go into companies, Fortune 500 companies, we help them with their corporate social responsibility programs all over the world. So we help Cisco, we help Symantec, we've helped MTV go in and say, well, what is your strategy in your CSR programs? We help with strategy, we help with operations, we basically help Cisco scale all of their CSR programs across the world. And what we do for them now is a lot of the vetting. So we do all of their NGO vetting. So the things you get for free as a donor or a volunteer coming to our site, you get our vetted nonprofits for free. Companies, we add on additional metrics on the vetting, and they pay us to do that.
So you basically customize a large enterprise's CSR program. Does that also include allowing their employees to donate to qualified nonprofits through Universal Giving and or volunteer, or can it just be a completely separate service that doesn't involve any relationship to Universal Giving organizations?
It can. It can go both ways. And it depends on the organization, but it can definitely go both ways. We can work through Universal Giving system, or we work with a system they already have, because sometimes clients have built their own systems in-house or they use another provider, and we have no problem doing that whatsoever. In fact, part of the grant making that works at Cisco is done through cyber grants, and they're a very strong partner of ours, and we like them very much, and so we'll work with their system.
What's the motivation for large companies to even have a CSR program?
Well, that's a very good question. I think a lot of people have traditionally looked at it as, well, it's just the right thing to do. And it is the right thing to do. But in the future, I think what companies are really starting to realize is this does affect your brand. Second, it's a real kind of me too. There's a lot of companies that are doing it. If you don't do it, you're really seen as behind the ball. Third is that what you're really looking at as well is employee retention and employee recruitment. When you look at young entrepreneurs and young students coming out of college, it's absolutely amazing. They are coming into companies, and if they're going to sell for you, if they're going to do client service, they want to know that your company is doing really, really good work across the world. And so they need to know that your company is doing this. Otherwise, they won't join. They're very demanding that way, and they should be. I love it. I think it's great. And then the final part is really when you look at it as client attraction and retention. Clients want to know, too, that the companies are good stewards of the funds. And so they're very, very involved in it as well. And they want to know that the people that they're working with are really being responsible to the community.
So how do you recommend a nonprofit organization gets the most out of your service?
Well, they get to register for free, so they can come on and register for free on our site. We definitely suggest that they provide very specific ways for people to get involved. Be specific about how your volunteer opportunities are registered. Be specific about the type of projects and gift packages you put on. Gift packages are a great way for the holidays. Give $25 to feed a family in Sudan, or give $100 to help adopt a chimpanzee in Zambia. There's a lot of creative ways, and if you can come up with creative ways to position your services, then we can help promote that for gift giving during the holidays. So I say both the projects and the holidays season, focusing on the projects and the gift packages are important that way.
So Pamela, I'd love to cover how an organization can create a compelling volunteer program that attracts a consistent stream of quality volunteers whose skills can be leveraged effectively. I know that a lot of nonprofits really struggle with tapping into the power of volunteers. They want the volunteers, but they have a hard time attracting them. They have a hard time keeping a consistent volunteer force that can keep projects moving. They have a hard time utilizing their volunteer force in a way that effectively moves the needle. What recommendations do you have? Do you have any best practices towards creating a compelling volunteer program that ensures a steady stream of volunteer talent and leverages this talent in the most effective ways possible?
Lorna, that is such a great question. And I think what really is key here is that volunteers aren't free. Their time is valuable. Your time is valuable. So whatever you are doing and engaging in the realm of volunteerism or managing volunteers does take resources, does take time, and does take thoughtfulness in how you're working with them. I have to say it's a very, very important part of what we do. We have dedicated people to recruitment, to orientation, and we actually have full planning and a manual on recruitment and orientation. And we also have a whole kind of matrix showing who the primary person responsible is, as well as people who are cross-trained in case that person isn't there. So you do need to have, I believe, a very strong program in place to manage this. That would be the number one thing at the beginning.
So is this a resource or document that you provide to your nonprofit partners?
We haven't done that. No, it's something that we continue to develop in-house. It's something we're continuing to work on. It's part of our operations. It's really something that's unique to us and what we've really found that works for us. I think every organization can use part of other people's manuals, but they do need to customize it for what's important to them. And I'll give a couple examples of this. Number one, you should definitely incorporate your values into it. What are your values? Who are you looking for when you're vetting these organizations? Number two, you have to have very, very clearly defined job descriptions so that people know what they're applying for and you get that fit really, really early on. And number three, you have to make sure that you are doing a very strong vetting process in the recruiting. And so that's a very strong part of our manual as well, is you can't just accept any volunteer in your organization. You really have to vet them first.
So vet them in what ways? Like, the traditional background check type of thing or testing?
There's different ways, and we continue to innovate on this. But first I would say is we definitely set up phone interviews before we bring them in. We set up a 10-minute phone interview to make sure that this person can speak well, can express themselves clearly, has right motives and intentions for being involved, and make sure that it's a good fit for both parties. So we definitely do that. Second is that no one gets that phone interview without first submitting which internship they'd like to have or volunteer position they'd like to have. Second, they need to give their resume. And third, they need to give a writing sample.
Interesting. And then do you also bring that person in for an in-person interview as well?
We do. We absolutely do. We bring them in for an in-person interview, and then if it's a good fit, then we introduce them to the manager of the department.
Wow, that's pretty cool. It's basically just like a traditional hiring process, essentially.
It absolutely is. You hit on something that is so important. We actually use this as a recruitment vehicle for us as well in hiring people. So when we see people, normally after 2 or 3 months, depends on the situation, but often, not all the time, but sometimes they can become paid, and it might be a paid internship, it might be a paid consultancy. Sometimes it leads to salaried employment, and sometimes it's just that we provide a recommendation, but it has to be win-win for both parties. And therefore, we try to provide really strong professional experience, recommendations, and then possibly employment at times.
So where can nonprofit organizations go to find these volunteers? Do you have a list of some of the best resources for an organization that wants to aggressively expand their volunteer base?
We do. We have our targets of where we go. A lot of it is that there are already established intern and volunteer fairs. And then number two is going to a lot of the universities. They are a hotbed for this. They are trying to place their students, and so we definitely look for that. And then three is that, there's a lot of professionals who are making job transitions, and that's equally important. It's not just about people volunteering to just give of their heart, which is great, and we have a lot of those too, but a lot of people are testing out new careers, testing out new skills, and really significantly wanting to learn new skills. So we've had people come in here where we've trained them and help them learn new skills that they wanted to grasp.
Yeah, universities, that's a really good place to hit up. Is, often when I think about finding volunteers, I think about going to places like idealist.org, Volunteer Match. Are there any other websites that pop up in your mind?
It's interesting. I think that those are good. Universal Giving certainly has our list of internships. I think those are two great places to start. I think those work to start, but I think I would definitely go into your local area. What's your local community? Because that's going to provide a lot of good insights as well.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Great. So in terms of meeting your quality model criteria, how could a nonprofit organization qualify for corporate volunteers through Universal Giving? Can you explain to me some of the criteria that you evaluate and help some of these organizations open the door for Universal Giving volunteers to pass through?
Sure. First of all, you have to have your finances straight, and depending on the company, they might require that your organization has been in existence for a certain number of years, whereas Universal Giving doesn't require that. We don't have a timeline of when you need to have been in existence. And so there are certain companies that have certain regulations, and not all companies are the same. But making sure your information is very complete. Second, it also has to be very compelling. It can't just be complete. You do need to have inspiring calls to action. You need to have that description and that communication in there very appealing to anyone wanting to get involved. It can't just be that everything is quote unquote right. You've got to make it something that's inspiring for other people to really want to get involved. Second, when they're registering, we strongly suggest too that they put in other items in there that would draw people's attention that are very positive. Have you won awards? Have you been funded by other great organizations? Have you some other great partnerships? Those are great things to show donors, corporations, volunteers about other ways that you've kind of been endorsed by the community. So those would be, I say, some of the top 3 tips to look at.
Great. Off the top of your head, can you give me some examples of any nonprofit organizations that might have crossed your radar as having awesome, compelling, and inspiring volunteer programs?
Oh, gosh. I think the Daraja Academy is a wonderful, wonderful organization. They run
Daraja Academy? How do you spell that?
Daraja. It's Daraja. And it's an academy that's in Kenya, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful organization serving school children, girls, and ensuring that these girls get the education. And you can give on Universal Giving's site to them, and you can also volunteer with them to help these girls get an education. And I'd say that's one of the ones that's just a very, very inspiring vision, very practical, and gets real results on the ground.
Some of the volunteer programs that I'm fascinated by are, for example, the organizations like Earthwatch that offer, really exciting exotic trips all over the world. You can go and, document the macaw population in Peru and spend 10 days by a macaw lick, for example. And they've got some really interesting adventure volunteer vacations. I always kind of find that to be very exciting. I'd love to do one of those one day.
Definitely. Those volunteer vacations are something that is very, very exciting because we have some of those on our site, which is called cross-cultural solutions on our site, which basically allow you to go do 2-week or 3-week interviews that allow you to come in and to go and volunteer all across the world. And so those are great.
Can you tell us more about cross-cultural solutions? That's through your program, or is that another organization?
No, they're another organization, but they're listed on our site.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I've heard about them before.
Yeah, so they have very strong 2-3 week programs that are very, very well run.
Yeah, I think that's a really good format, too, for nonprofit organizations that might be in some of the more exotic parts of the world. If you could package up a 10-day volunteer vacation that makes it sound like, it's both an adventure as well as service, I think you can attract a lot of quality people from the corporate world that are looking for a more interesting vacation.
Yes, absolutely. And the nice thing about that is it's kind of an add-on, Lorna. You go on vacation, you can add on a volunteer trip to that vacation. Sometimes it can be done concurrently, or you might want to add it on. I think that's one of the things we're seeing as a trend with families, for example. They might go volunteer in some kind of exotic place and then volunteer a couple of days at the end of the trip. So you don't always have to do a distinct volunteer vacation. You can make it an add-on.
Yeah, totally. And some companies, too, offer volunteer days as paid leave of absence or paid time off. And so, if you go away to another country, which I have done, I've tacked on we used to get 6 days of volunteer time, so I'd tack on another 6 days and volunteer for an organization. And it just extended my stay in the country, but also just made it so much more meaningful to be there.
Yes, it is. And I think that's one of the things that we can be very, very creative about how we volunteer. And that is what's so neat, is that it doesn't have to be just one idea or one way or just a one-day event.
Great. So, hey, do you have any closing words for some of our nonprofits in the audience that want to develop a robust, ongoing volunteer program?
Oh, goodness. I think it's such a joy, Lorna. It really is. When you are going and helping people be a part of your organization, everyone wants to be a part of a community, Lorna. And I have to tell you, one of my greatest joys is working with my team, whether they're paid, whether they're volunteers, whether they're interns. I just had an intern come back and visit me. She had worked with me a year ago. She went to London. She came back, called me up. Can I come see you? That's my joy. I think it's so wonderful. Team is what makes your idea take off. Team is what makes your day-to-day so lovely. It's, it's really both a strategic and a day-to-day thing as to, why you should do it. And I think I would just say, make sure that the wonderful value that you're getting, they're getting too. We ask our volunteers, our interns, our team members, what are your goals? What are your goals outside of universal giving? How can we help you? And make sure that their experience here is where they are very, very much learning. We have pretty aggressive plans for people here. They get to do a lot of what our paid staff does. And if you prove yourself, we'll make sure that you're on a pathway to success. So I would say you treat it very seriously, because these are people and this is their lives, and to care sincerely about how they're growing. And of course they'll help you, and that's wonderful, but we should be helping each other.
Why, thank you. Those are great words of advice. I can hear that they come directly from the heart.
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you so much. This is Lorna Lee, Editor-in-Chief of Entrepreneurs for a Change, and we were just speaking with Pamela Hawley, founder and CEO of Universal Giving, a nonprofit organization that helps people give money and volunteer all across the world. For more information, please go to www.universalgiving.org, and to find out more about Pamela, go to her blog Living and Giving at www.pamelahawley.wordpress.com. Thank you so much, Pamela.
Thank you, Lorna. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
Wasn't that a great interview? I have to say I really resonate with Pamela's advice on team building, and am in the process right now of building out a great team to help me grow my business. Now, if you're thinking, I'd love to have a great team of people to work for me, or even just one great employee, but I just can't afford it, I have a solution for you. It's called outsourcing. There are college-educated professionals in other regions of the world like Eastern Europe, India, Pakistan, and the Philippines who speak good, even great English, who are skilled in a number of fields like customer service, web development, graphic design, social media marketing, writing, and more, who would be overjoyed to work for you. Why? Because they get to work from home and receive a great hourly wage in their region for their services. And depending on the country and the job, what is considered to be a great hourly wage might be $2 for data entry, $5 for online assistant work, $10 for web programming, which would be a fraction of the cost of hiring an equivalent professional in a Western economy. I know it's easy to get into the mindset of thinking that offshore services are lower quality than hiring someone, say, in the United States. I've hired people from all over the world, and what I can tell you is there are good and bad employees everywhere. I've hired great web developers in India and the Philippines, and paid more money for terrible web developers in the US who left me with half-baked projects I had to scrap. It's also easy to feel guilty about outsourcing and think that you are contributing to the loss of jobs in the US and participating in globalization's race to the bottom line. I'd like to encourage you to get over this, because if you're seriously considering outsourcing, it's because you're not in a stage where you can hire dedicated US, UK, Australia, Canada-based staff, so there is no job to be lost. A lot of these jobs that offshore contractors will joyfully and earnestly do are not jobs that are desirable or appealing to Western university grads, such as data entry, web research, email outreach, social media update scheduling, etc. You are not exploiting anyone. You are creating gainful, at-will, fulfilling employment for people in other countries. The faster you grow as a business, the more employment opportunities you can create, period, at home and overseas. And your growth is severely limited if you're doing everything yourself. And I personally believe that creating good, empowering, mutually rewarding employment opportunities is one of the most positive social contributions that businesses can make. So I'd like to invite you to adopt this affirmation. Somewhere out there in the world, there is an abundance of talented, motivated, and qualified professionals who would be overjoyed and grateful to work for my organization. Where do you find these motivated offshore professionals? There's a number of freelance job sites where you can find great talent. The one that I use the most is called Odesk. Odesk allows you to post jobs and search for service providers. It has a desktop tracking tool that allows your team members to clock in and out of your project, track their hours, and invoice you for payment. The tool takes screen captures of their desktop so you can verify whether they were indeed working on your projects during their billable hours or surfing Facebook. Odesk provides a rating and commenting system for providers as well as business owners, so you can choose only to work with providers with the best track record and an established history of working on Odesk. And if you have a strong rating as a business owner, then you'll attract the best candidates to your job. I usually select providers who have at least a 4.5 rating, a 4 out of 5 English proficiency level, and at least 100 hours of log time on Odesk. Now, there's a whole art to outsourcing that enables you to attract the best candidates for a job while weeding out unsuitable candidates who will waste your time. Here are some outsourcing tips for you. Include a test that qualifies candidates for the job that you're hiring for. It could be a writing test, a data entry test, or a very specific question that will identify candidates with the experience and knowledge you're looking for. Include a password that the candidate needs to include in their application. Ignore any cover letters that don't include that password. This weeds out spam applicants and applicants with poor attention to detail. If it's a job you can divide into smaller, equal pieces, do this and hire more people to get the job done faster and spread your risk. So, for example, if I need to research data for 1,000 company listings, I'll hire 4 people to work on 250 each. That way, if one person drops out, there are 3 other people keeping the project moving, and you can divide the remaining work among them. Finally, hire fast and fire faster. I know this might sound cold, but I've wasted a lot of time giving employees a second, third, fourth, etc. chance, and it's almost always been an exercise in frustration and a waste of time. Sometimes it's good to recognize they are not a good fit. It's better for you, and it's better for them. Alright, that's the mindset and tool tip of the day. See you next time! Thanks, folks, for listening to the Entrepreneurs for a Change podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us reach more people with inspiring stories like this one by giving us a 5-star rating in iTunes. If this podcast inspires you to join the movement of change-making entrepreneurs, we'd love to give you a jumpstart with our free Business Changemakers Toolkit, which you can download at www.entrepreneursforachange.com/join. If you have a changemaker in mind you'd love for us to interview, go to entrepreneursforachange.com/suggest and tell us who and why. Finally, feel free to stop by facebook.com/entrepreneurs for a change to share your thoughts and say hello.